So here's why I asked you these questions. I asked you these questions because right now federal judges are under the worst shadow of physical threat in my lifetime and perhaps in the history of this country. And in responding to those threats, we have the United States Marshal Service, which reports to the Department of Justice. And I have now over a dozen times asked the Marshal Service, will you investigate behind the utterer of a threat if the evidence justifies it? That's a super easy question. The answer is yeah, of course we will.
Welcome back. What we just witnessed in the House Judiciary Committee is a textbook example of political grandstanding blowing up in the opposition's face. Representative Jared Moskowitz came armed with a prop, a document blacked out with heavy redactions, attempting to paint Attorney General Pam Bondi's Department of Justice as secretive and obstructive. But this wasn't an honest push for government transparency, it was theater. From a conservative perspective, accountability matters, but so do the facts. For years, the mainstream media and congressional left ignored the tight lid kept on high-profile investigations by previous leadership. Now, suddenly, they want to pretend they are the champions of open records. When Moskowitz tried to aggressively cut off the Attorney General to control the narrative, Bondi didn't back down. She commanded the room, demanded her right to speak, and forced the committee to actually look at the facts. What happened next wasn't just an embarrassment for Moskowitz, it completely undermined the entire premise of the committee's attack strategy. You need to see this to believe it. If you want honest conservative analysis that exposes this kind of partisan spin, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now.
Just to finish Senator Blumenthal's point, I hope you realize how ridiculous the four of you look. Spouting these preposterous, canned answers in a forum in which A, you're supposed to tell the truth, and B, you're supposed to demonstrate the judicial capacity to make independent, factual decisions in hard cases. If you can't even sit here and say that Joe Biden won that election or that the Capitol was attacked, what's left? What's left if a hard case comes your way as a judge, and let's say the Trump administration is bearing down on that? Why would we ever believe that you would give the litigants a fair hearing and a fair decision if the executive branch was leaning in on you when we can't get a reasonable answer out of any of you with the executive branch leaning in on you to give these ridiculous answers today? I'm really sorry to have to go through this and that you have to go through this. But it would be nice if you could tell your executive branch handlers, for instance, Ms. Clark, I'm supported by Lindsey Graham. He's a friend of President Trump. He's the second senior person on the Republican side in the Judiciary Committee. He's likely to be the next Judiciary Committee chair. I think I'll be okay. I don't need to make myself ridiculous at your direction. It'd be great if you could have said that. It would be great if your answers were simple and honest here today. It's really disappointing. Let me ask a different question, a legal question. A judge, you want to be judges. A judge gets a threat to the judge's life or to the judge's family. Can you imagine a scenario in which liability may attach to individuals beyond the utterer of that threat? Ms. Clark?
Senator, as a prosecutor, there are instances where there's some responsibility that is assigned to someone who is not the utterer of a threat to an individual. And so to answer your question, yes, I can imagine.
You agree?
Yes, Senator, and if confirmed to the bench, I would follow all Supreme Court precedent and Ninth Circuit
You agree,
precedent.
Mr. Rick, you agree?
Yes, Senator, I would agree with that.
I don't know that I care what you think, Ms. Westerkamp, because you're going to international trade and you're probably not going to see much of this, but do you agree?
Yes, Senator.
Yeah, and those doctrines that would provide the legal basis for investigation in those scenarios would include doctrines like, name one, Ms. Clark.
Senator, doctrines that are, if someone is essentially carrying out
Solicitation, would that be
Yes.
one? Solicitation of a
Yes.
threat?
yes,
Or a conspiracy out of which the threat emerged, would that be another one?
yes,
Yes. How about, and it's the product of an enterprise under the racketeering statutes. Would that also be another way that liability could extend beyond the utterer?
that is correct, Senator.
Can you think of any others, Ms. Lane, where liability extends beyond the utterer of the threat? What are some of the legal theories that would support that kind of investigation and prosecution?
Senator, the doctrines you mentioned, I would agree with, and I would just look always to the federal law and federal statutes guiding that.
Mr. Recchi?
Senator, I would agree with that. I think you covered the major ones, conspiracy, RICO. There may be other avenues of potential legal liability, but I think you covered the three big ones in that scenario.
Ms. Westerkamp, you agree?
Senator, I'm not aware if there are any more. With my practice before the Court of International Trade and Court of Federal Claims, it doesn't touch on criminal law.
So here's why I asked you these questions. I asked you these questions because right now federal judges are under the worst shadow of physical threat in my lifetime and perhaps in the history of this country. And in responding to those threats, we have the United States Marshal Service, which reports to the Department of Justice. And I have now over a dozen times asked the Marshal Service, will you investigate behind the utterer of a threat if the evidence justifies it? That's a super easy question. The answer is, yeah, of course we will. They won't answer that. They won't answer that. And I point this out because judges across the country need to pay attention to the fact that the Marshal Service won't confirm that it will investigate behind the utterer of a threat if the evidence supports that. And why would that be the case? That would be the case because when you get behind the utterer of a lot of these threats, you run into right-wing conspiracies. And this MAGA Department of Justice would rather not go there. And so they leave judges exposed with investigations in which they aren't doing investigative 101 work that you've all identified as plausible legal theories. And we need to fix that. We need to fix that.
Unbelievable. If you ever want a clear picture of why the American public has completely lost faith in congressional hearings, just replay that clip. Jared Moskowitz walked into that room looking for a viral clip to post on social media, and instead, he handed conservatives the ultimate political gift. Let's break down the sheer incompetence of this exchange. Moskowitz stands up, holds up a piece of paper covered in black ink, and dramatically asks who was responsible for hiding this information from the public. He wants the cameras to catch him holding the smoking gun. But Pam Bondi doesn't play defense. She behaves like the seasoned prosecutor she is. Instead of letting him control the floor, she completely flips the script. She looks directly at him and asks a very simple, devastating question. What is the date on that document? And right there, the trap snaps shut. It turns out those heavy, extensive redactions weren't made under Bondi's watch. They were made under the previous administration by Merrick Garland's Department of Justice. Think about how catastrophic that is for the Democrats' narrative. Moskowitz is visibly stunned. He completely stumbles over his words, and in a moment of pure desperation to salvage his time, he actually utters the words, "Well, then they dropped the ball." Did he really just say that? He literally admitted on the record that his own party's previous DOJ leadership failed the American people on transparency. You can't write a script this good. He went from trying to corner the current Attorney General to actively condemning his own political allies for dropping the ball on accountability. Beyond the sheer comedy of the self-sabotage, there are major political implications here. This exchange is showing the total hypocrisy of the left's sudden obsession with transparency. Where was this aggressive energy when Merrick Garland was keeping these exact files under lock and key? Why weren't progressives waving these documents around years ago? The answer is obvious. It was never about the truth. It was always about selective partisan theater. Furthermore, Bondi's refusal to be talked over is a massive win for conservative viewers. When Moskowitz tried to shout her down with a frantic "I'm talking," Bondi stood her ground, kept her composure, and maintained absolute control over her testimony. She showed exactly how conservatives need to handle weaponized congressional panels, with cold hard facts, unwavering confidence, and an absolute refusal to let partisan actors rewrite history. This exchange is going to have a lasting impact on public opinion because it shows the absolute emptiness of these partisan attacks. When you strip away the media spin and the theatrical props, the left simply doesn't have the facts on their side. Jared Moskowitz came for a fight, but Pam Bondi brought the receipts and forced him to confess his own party's failures.